If you grew up in the 1950s, Christmas wasn't just a holiday, it was an event, the kind that made the whole world slow down and glow. It started weeks before December 25th. You could feel it building. In the stores, in the streets, in the air itself. There were no Black Friday stampedes, no online shopping carts, no overnight shipping promises. Christmas didn't arrive in a box on your doorstep. It arrived slowly, deliberately, like the first snowfall of the season. You walked downtown with your family, past windows dressed in cotton snow and mechanical elves that jerked and spun behind the glass. Department stores became wonderlands. Woolworths and Sears felt like cathedrals of tinsel and anticipation. And the music. Oh, the music. It poured from every storefront speaker. Bing Crosby's voice rolling over you like warm honey. Nat King Cole singing about chestnuts roasting. Judy Garland wishing you a merry little Christmas. The songs weren't background noise. They were the heartbeat of the season. Kids pressed their noses against toy store windows, breath fogging the glass, pointing at dolls with porcelain faces and tin trains that circled tiny painted towns. You didn't get everything you wanted. You got one thing, maybe two, and that made it mean everything. The tree. That was its own ritual. Dad would load the family into the station wagon, and you'd drive out to a lot where rows of pine and spruce stood waiting like soldiers. The smell hit you before you even stepped out of the car. Fresh, sharp, alive. You'd walk between the trees, brushing your hand along the branches, until Dad found the one. It was never perfect. One side was always a little bare, but that didn't matter. Because once it was home, strapped to the roof of the car with twine, it became the most perfect tree in the world. Setting it up was a production. Dad wrestling with the metal stand, Mum directing from across the room, a little to the left. No, your other left. And when it finally stood tall in the corner of the living room, the whole house seemed to exhale. Then came the decorating. Not with a theme, not with matching ornaments from a catalogue. You decorated with what you had. Glass bulbs handed down from your grandmother. Tinsel that you draped strand by strand, not in clumps, because that was how you were taught. Popcorn strings that you and your siblings made while listening to the radio. Paper snowflakes cut by hand and hung with thread. And the lights. Those big, heavy bulbs. Red, green, blue, yellow. They got hot. You could feel the heat if you held your hand too close. And if one went out, the whole string went dark, and you'd spend an hour testing each bulb until you found the culprit. But when those lights finally came on, the room transformed. It wasn't just bright, it was alive. Every bulb glowed like a tiny sun, casting colored shadows across the walls, reflecting off the tinsel until the whole tree shimmered like something out of a dream. There were no LED icicles, no pre-lit artificial trees, no timers. You plugged it in when you wanted magic, and you unplugged it before bed, because those bulbs were fire hazards, and everyone knew it. The days leading up to Christmas were filled with small, sacred rituals. Mom baking in the kitchen, sugar cookies shaped like stars and bells and reindeer, decorated with colored sugar that stuck to your fingers. Fruitcake that took weeks to make and even longer to eat. Fudge, peanut brittle. Divinity. The oven was always warm, and the house always smelled like cinnamon and butter and love. There were Christmas cards, not digital greetings. Real cards, with glitter and fold-out scenes of snow-covered villages and angels. They arrived in the mail every day, and Mum would prop them up on the mantel, a growing gallery of friends and family, near and far. You'd watch Christmas specials on television, but not on demand, not whenever you wanted. You waited. You circled the date on the calendar, and when Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer or A Charlie Brown Christmas finally aired, the whole family gathered around the one TV in the house, and you didn't move until it was over, because you couldn't rewind it, you couldn't pause it, you couldn't stream it later. If you missed it, it was gone until next year, so you paid attention, you were present. Christmas Eve was the crescendo. Church services filled with candlelight and hymns, voices rising together in silent night, the flame from your candle flickering as you sang. The air smelled like wax and wool coats and old hymnals. Then home, where the tree glowed in the window like a beacon, where the stockings hung heavy and lumpy on the mantel, where the cookies and milk sat waiting for Santa, even though you were starting to suspect. You tried to stay awake. You always tried. Listening for the sound of reindeer hooves on the roof, the jingle of bells, the creak of floorboards. But sleep always won, and when you woke up, the magic had already happened. Christmas morning, the house was still dark, but the tree was glowing, and underneath it, presents, not piles, not mountains, just a few carefully wrapped gifts, each one placed with intention. You didn't tear into them, you took your time. You felt the weight of each box, you shook it gently. You peeled back the paper slowly, savoring the suspense, because this was the moment you'd been waiting for all year. A new doll with a painted face and a dress that buttoned up the back, a metal truck with wheels that actually turned, a book with a cloth cover and illustrations that made you want to read it twice, a sweater that Grandma knitted, the sleeves a little too long, but you wore it anyway because she made it just for you. The gifts were simple, but they weren't small. They were everything. And then, breakfast. The whole family around the table, pancakes and bacon and hot cocoa, the radio playing carols, the wrapping paper still scattered across the floor like confetti. No one was checking their phone, because there were no phones to check. No one was taking 100 photos, because you got one shot, maybe two, with Dad's brownie camera. You smiled, you held still, you hoped it turned out. And if your family was really fancy, Dad had a home movie camera, a clunky thing with a blinding light that made everyone squint. He'd film for 30 seconds, maybe a minute, capturing Grandma cutting the turkey, kids playing with their new toys, the dog chewing on a ribbon. Those few minutes of silent, jumpy footage were all you had, and somehow that made them precious. Dinner was in the afternoon, the whole extended family crammed into one house. Aunts and uncles and cousins you only saw a few times a year. The table stretched the length of the dining room, covered in a lace cloth, set with the good china, turkey and ham, mashed potatoes and gravy, green bean casserole, cranberry sauce from a can, still holding the shape of the can, sliced into perfect circles, rolls that were gone before the blessing was finished, and pie, so much pie, pumpkin, pecan, mince, apple, all homemade, all perfect. After dinner, the men would fall asleep in the living room, bellies full, the football game flickering on the TV. The women would wash dishes and talk in the kitchen. The kids would play outside in the snow, or inside with their new toys, until the sun went down and it was time to go home. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't Instagrammable. There were no viral moments, no unboxing videos, no influencers telling you what Christmas should look like. It was just real. Real lights that got tangled every year. Real cookies that burned on the bottom. Real families that argued and laughed and forgave and loved, all in the same breath. And maybe that's why those Christmases still feel warmer than the ones we have now. Because every flickering light carried something we've lost. Presence, not the filtered, curated, posted for likes kind, but the actual, physical, undistracted being there kind. You weren't thinking about the next thing. You were in the moment, because that's all there was. The 1950s weren't perfect. Life was harder in a lot of ways, but Christmas was simple. And in that simplicity, there was a kind of magic we've spent decades trying to recreate, because the past isn't gone, it's just waiting. Waiting in the smell of pine, in the glow of colored lights, in the crackle of wrapping paper, in the voices singing Silent Night in a candlelit church. And if you listen closely, you can still hear it, the echo of a Christmas that wasn't about having everything, but about cherishing what you had, because yesterday never truly disappeared. It just changed its wrapping paper.